Most people remember the exact moment they realized something had changed. It wasn't a diagnosis. It wasn't a fall. It was something smaller, a flight of stairs that left them breathing harder than it should have, a bag that felt heavier than they remembered, a morning where getting out of bed required a kind of effort that didn't used to exist. And in that moment, most people do the same thing. They tell themselves it's just age. They accept it. They move on. And the process continues, quietly, steadily, beneath the surface, because nobody told them what was actually happening inside their body. My name is Dr. Samuel Prescott. I've spent more than 2 decades studying the biology of how muscle changes after 50, not the surface-level changes, but the deep cellular, systemic changes that begin long before you can see or feel them. And what I'm going to share with you today are 5 specific things that happen inside your body at and after the age of 50 that most people never hear about. 5 silent shifts in your biology that, if left unaddressed, create a trajectory that becomes increasingly difficult to reverse with each passing year. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what your body actually needs you to know. Before I start, I want to ask you something. Think about your body 5 years ago. The way your legs felt on a walk. The way you recovered after a physical day. The way you moved without thinking about it. Now compare that to today. If there's a gap, even a small one, between those 2 versions of yourself, this video is exactly where you need to be right now. Because that gap is not random. It has a mechanism. And once you understand the mechanism, you understand what can actually be done about it. The first change begins at the level of the muscle cell itself. And it is one of the most consequential and least discussed shifts in human physiology after 50. It is called anabolic resistance. Under the age of 40, when you expose your body to physical activity or to adequate protein, the muscle responds with a clear, efficient signal. Rebuild, maintain, grow. The machinery inside the cell activates. Protein synthesis increases. The tissue stays dense and functional. But after 50, that signal becomes harder to transmit. The muscle cell, for reasons that researchers have been studying intensively for years, begins to require significantly more stimulation to produce the same response. The same walk, the same meal, the same effort, all of it produces a weaker signal than it did before. And a weaker signal means less rebuilding. Less rebuilding means gradual loss. And gradual loss, compounded over years, becomes a kind of functional decline that changes the quality of your daily life in ways you can feel but may not be able to explain. What makes anabolic resistance particularly difficult to detect is that it doesn't announce itself. You don't feel it happening. You simply notice, over time, that things are harder, that recovery takes longer, that the body doesn't respond the way it used to. And by the time most people recognize the pattern, the process has already been running for years. The second change is hormonal, and it operates in close connection with the first. After 50, the body's production of the hormones that signal muscle maintenance begins a sustained decline. Testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1. The 3 primary anabolic hormones in the human body all follow a downward trajectory that accelerates through the 50s and 60s. These are not peripheral hormones. They are central to the communication system that tells your body to invest in muscle tissue. They are the chemical language your body uses to say, maintain this, protect this, keep this strong. When their levels fall, the message becomes quieter, and the body, receiving a quieter signal, begins to redirect resources away from muscle maintenance and toward other metabolic priorities. The tissue starts to thin. The strength that was once maintained automatically now requires increasing effort to hold on to, and for many people, even that effort isn't enough, because the hormonal environment that once made maintenance easy is no longer present in the same way. This is one of the reasons why the experience of aging muscle feels so different from what people expect. They assume that if they stay active and eat reasonably well, the muscle will maintain itself. And for much of their 30s and early 40s, that assumption was correct. But after 50, the hormonal floor has dropped. The baseline support that once existed quietly in the background is diminished, and the body needs something different, something more targeted, to compensate for what the hormonal system is no longer providing automatically. The third change is one that most people have never heard of. despite the fact that it may be the most powerful accelerator of muscle loss in the body after 50. It is called chronic low-grade inflammation, and it is nothing like the inflammation most people are familiar with. This is not the swelling after an injury. This is not the redness and heat of an immune response. This is a persistent, systemic, invisible inflammatory state that operates at a cellular level, interfere with the very mechanisms that allow muscle tissue to repair and regenerate. Researchers have a term for it, inflammaging, because of its specific relationship to the biology of aging, and its effects on muscle are profound. When this background inflammation is present, it disrupts the signaling pathways that coordinate muscle protein synthesis. It accelerates the breakdown of muscle protein. It interferes with satellite cells, the specialized cells responsible for repairing damaged muscle fiber. And it creates an internal environment that is fundamentally hostile to muscle maintenance, even when the person is doing everything else right. People who are eating well, staying active, and still losing muscle mass are often losing it because of this invisible inflammatory state that is quietly working against every positive effort they make. It is one of the most frustrating and least understood dimensions of muscle loss after 50, and it is one of the most important to address directly. The fourth change operates at a level that most fitness and nutrition advice never reaches, and it explains something that confuses many people: why eating more protein doesn't always solve the problem. After 50, the efficiency with which the body converts dietary protein into functional muscle tissue begins to decline significantly. This process, muscle protein synthesis, is not a simple equation where more input equals more output. It is a precise biochemical sequence that requires a complete and correctly proportioned set of essential amino acids to run from start to finish. If even one of those amino acids is insufficient, the entire process is compromised. The body cannot substitute or compensate. It simply fails to complete the rebuild. What this means in practice is that a person over 50 can be consuming what appears to be an adequate amount of protein from food, from habit, from general health awareness, and still be experiencing significant muscle loss, because the specific amino acids required for efficient muscle protein synthesis are not present in the right balance or in sufficient quantity. The food is being eaten. The protein is being digested. But the building blocks needed to actually complete the repair and maintenance cycle are missing. And the muscle, unable to finish what it started, continues to thin. This is a limiting amino acid effect, and it is one of the most underappreciated factors in age-related muscle decline, and one of the most actionable once you understand it. If any of what I'm describing feels familiar, if you recognize the gap, the heaviness, the recovery that takes longer than it should, I want you to pause here, not because I want to alarm you, but because what I'm about to say is important, and I need you to hear it clearly. The changes I've described so far are real, and they are progressive. Left without support, they compound. Each one makes the next one worse. The reduced hormonal signal makes the anabolic resistance worse. The anabolic resistance makes the protein synthesis less efficient. The low-grade inflammation interferes with all of it simultaneously. And the result is a body that is losing capacity for self-maintenance faster than it needs to, not because of age alone, but because the biological system is not receiving the specific inputs it needs to function correctly. There is a natural approach that a growing number of people are using specifically to address these mechanisms, not as a shortcut, not as a replacement for physical activity or nutrition, but as targeted support for the exact biological processes that decline after 50. It works at the level of amino acid availability, giving the body the precise building blocks required to support muscle protein synthesis efficiently. You can find the information in the link in the description of this video and in the first comment below. If you are experiencing what I've described, the fatigue, the reduced strength, the body that no longer responds the way it used to, I strongly encourage you to look at what's there before you finish watching this video. Because the fifth change I'm about to describe is the one that most people never hear about until it's already well advanced. And once you understand it, you'll understand exactly why time is a factor here. The fifth change is neurological, and it is in many ways the most invisible of all. After 50, the motor neurons, the specialized nerve cells that carry electrical signals from the brain to the muscle fibers, begin to decline in number and in efficiency. This is not a disease process. It is a normal part of aging biology. but its consequences for muscle function are profound and largely irreversible once they progress beyond a certain threshold. Motor neurons are the communication infrastructure between your nervous system and your muscle tissue. Each motor neuron controls a group of muscle fibers. When a motor neuron degenerates, the fibers it controls go silent. They stop receiving the activation signal. They are no longer recruited during movement, and muscle fibers that are not activated are not maintained. They atrophy. They are reabsorbed by the body, and the strength, the power, and the coordination that depended on those fibers diminishes, quietly, without warning, without pain. This is why, after 50, two people can do the same exercise with the same frequency, and one of them will maintain their muscle far better than the other. The difference is often not what they're doing externally. The difference is in the neurological infrastructure that determines how effectively the external effort translates into muscle activation. And that infrastructure, the density and efficiency of the motor neuron network, is directly influenced by the same biological environment I've been describing throughout this video. The hormonal levels, the inflammatory state, the amino acid availability. Everything is connected. Everything either supports the system or degrades it. This is what makes the picture after 50 so important to understand clearly and act on directly. You are not dealing with one problem. You are dealing with 5 interconnected biological shifts that feed each other, compound each other, and accelerate each other when left without support. Anabolic resistance reduces the muscle's ability to respond. Hormonal decline removes the background signal that once made maintenance automatic. Chronic low-grade inflammation interferes with repair and regeneration. Declining protein synthesis efficiency means the body can no longer use what it takes in as effectively as it once did. And neurological degradation quietly disconnects the muscle from the brain, fiber by fiber, without announcing itself. The trajectory of all 5, unaddressed, leads to the same place, a body that is progressively less capable of supporting the life you want to live. Less strength for the things that require strength. Less stability for the things that require balance. Less endurance for the things that require sustained effort. And eventually, and this is the part that matters most, less independence. Less confidence in your own physical capacity. A daily life organized around what you can no longer do, rather than what you still can. That trajectory is not inevitable, but it is a default trajectory if the biology is not supported. And here's the truth that I want you to carry out of this video. The window in which that support produces meaningful results is not permanent. The body that can still respond today may be significantly less responsive in 3 years, in 5 years. The muscle tissue that still exists today and can be maintained is easier to support than muscle tissue that has already been lost. Preservation is always more achievable than recovery. And every year delay is a year the system moves further in the wrong direction, with less capacity to course correct. I've spent 2 decades studying this biology precisely because I've seen what happens when people understand it early, and what happens when they don't. The people who understand it early make different decisions. They support their bodies differently. They arrive at 60, at 65, at 70 with a functional reserve that the people who ignore the signals simply do not have. They are not superhuman. They are not exceptional. They simply acted while the window was still open. The link in the description below and in the first comment of this video is the place to start if you are ready to take that seriously. What you will find, there is a natural approach built specifically around the mechanisms I've described today, addressing the amino acid availability, supporting the biological environment that muscle maintenance requires, giving the body the building blocks that the research consistently shows are insufficient in most people over 50. It is not a dramatic promise. It is a targeted, rational response to a specific and well-documented biological problem, and it is available to you right now, while your body still has a capacity to respond to it. The 5 changes I described today are happening in your body, whether you address them or not. The only question is whether you give your system what it needs to slow that process and support the tissue you still have, or whether you wait until the gap between who you are and who you want to be becomes too wide to close. The link is below. The time to look at it is now. Your body is still capable of responding, but that window does not stay open forever.